evening, everyone. How are you, Michelle?
Good. How are you, Jenny?
I'm good. Did you have a good weekend?
I did. How about you?
I did. It was too short, but alas, here we are. Love it. Well, welcome everybody to Women, Wealth, and Probably Wine. As per usual, we're going to jump right in and discuss a little bit about the wine. We picked a really fun one for you guys today. The winery is Can Samoy. Beautiful bottle. It's really unique and recognize it anywhere because it's a shorter bottle. What I love, we're drinking the Xarello, the 2021 vintage. And what I love about this specific producer is my favorite varietal of wine is champagne. And there are many different methods that you can make. And there are other champagne substitutes, if you will. One of them is Prosecco and one of them is Cava. And Cava is actually done in the same method as champagne in a lot of cases. So you'll get like some similar tones or flavor profiles. And Pepe Reventes is the man behind Can Samoy, and he is also the man behind Reventos Cava, which is the longest standing producer of Cava ever, and they're fantastic. If you ever see Reventos Cava, I would highly recommend you pick it up. It's a really, really, really reasonable price point for Cava, and done in the method champenois, so it really drinks to me like a beautiful champagne. This is his pet project. Xarello is a varietal it's a Mediterranean varietal coming from Catalonia. This one is also done in stainless steel tanks. It's fermented in stainless steel, which is what we touched on last week. It preserves brightness and acidity. So a really, really beautiful summer wine to drink, but it has a little bit more character, a lot of lemon zest, a little bit of herbaceousness as well. It's not boring at all, but it's still really easy drinking. So love this one. It's kind of a continuation of you don't just have to drink Sauvignon Blanc, and a really cool story. You're going to get a lot of white fruit on the nose here, and then on the palate, that herbaceousness and lemon zest as well. So if you guys, first of all, have never tried Xarello, highly recommend, because that's going to be across the board, but also really love this producer and what they're doing. Spanish wines are a huge cheat code. So if you guys want to drink a very high quality wine and you don't want to spend a ton of money, go to Spain. That should be your first stop, because they do a really high quality product for an affordable price point, which is one of my favorite things about it. So even if you're not drinking the pick for this week, I hope you're drinking something refreshing. If you're in Texas, it is literally 98 degrees already. It's supposed to be 100 this whole week, and I'm not here for it. So hopefully you're drinking something good.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm learning so much about wine each week.
I mean, you got it, right? Like, life is so boring if you're not trying all these other varietals. So I'm definitely here to be your guru and open your eyes to some different varietals.
Thanks.
Love it. So let's jump into the rose and the thorn for this week. Mish, what was your rose and what was your thorn?
Yes. So my rose for this week was my family came up to visit me from Maryland, and we had a fun day walking through the city and got to explore a little the Upper East Side and then also Central Park. Leads into my 1.5 miles, and it was very humid in the city, and just like soaking like wet with sweat. I know, gross, but like just walking through the city like that is not fun. But then this morning I went to go get out of bed and my legs were so sore and like I could barely walk. So that was the week.
So, like, needless to say, Michelle did not go to Equinox yesterday.
Right. No, I did not.
I love it. I love it.
Yes. What about you? What are your rose and thorn for the week?
Gosh. Okay. So it's really funny. Like, the more we do this, the more I struggle to identify thorns, because I feel like life has just been good lately, which is great. That's how life works, right? Seasonality. Some seasons are really good, some are bad. My rose for last week was I got to go to a tasting dinner yesterday evening with my husband and a couple of really good friends. It's like an underground supper club, if you will. and it was a 9-course meal, 10-course pairing, and they switched back and forth between sake and wine. And the distributors for the wine were from Napa, which is a really big swerve for me because that's not normally a region that I focus on, but they did some really unique varietals and they were just doing some really cool stuff. So that was really fun. I got to learn about a couple new places that I hadn't been aware of before. And then my thorn. Obviously I've talked about before how I'm obsessed with reading, but I love memoirs. Memoirs are some of my favorite books. They're almost like my beach reads, if you will. I just really get into them. I last week I read literally in 3 days, I read Demi Moore's memoir, Inside Out. And it was just gripping. I could not put the book down. Her experiences were so insane. And it was really one of those books that you just really immerse yourself in. And then when you're done, you're like, oh, I don't want to be done. Yeah. And then I found out after reading it that her ex-husband, Bruce Willis, has a really aggressive form of dementia. Which I guess I was living under a rock, so I didn't know that. But anyways, it hit me really hard because I had just read a long book that had a lot of references to Bruce Willis. So I felt especially hindered by that news. And that was my thorn for the week, but still highly recommend the book if you're into memoirs.
Add it to my list.
Honestly, it's a great one. And it's I don't know, for me, I like to read about other people's lives because I really do believe that experience is better secondhand. So to hear about other people's, struggles and how they handled it, it's just fascinating to me to see, you just don't really know what is going on in these people's lives. You're just getting the highlight reel. So it's interesting to read about people overcoming struggle, which is kind of what that book is a study in.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah. Well, that sounds like a really nice weekend, and definitely adding that book to my list.
All the books, guys. If you want tips on books, we are here for y'all.
Yes,
promise.
Yes.
Speaking of books,
that leads us into this week's topics, where we are going to unveil our top 6 most influential reads that both of us read, and these are the books that really made an impact on our lives. And I know at least one memoir is on it, Jenny. So
yep. Yeah. Had to put the memoir in there.
Exactly. Had to put one in there. And to start us off, I'm just going to go over the quote of the day. So we're going to be bringing you a new quote every week.
Quote queen.
Quote queen. Yeah. So this week I wanted to focus it around books because that's our topic of the week. So the quote of the day is, reading is an exercise in empathy, and exercise in walking in someone else's shoes for a while. That was by Mallory Blackman. That really ties into a memoir. Jenny was saying, you really understand the lives of these people and what they went through. A lot of the times when we're hearing about celebrities, influential figures, we're just really getting those highlights and reels or, the drama of their lives, but we really don't get behind the scenes. And memoirs are a really good place to kind of decode that and really get into their lives and see who they are as a person.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So Jenny, why don't you start us off and take us through your first most influential read?
Okay, first I have to preface by telling you guys that these are not in order, okay? And also choosing 3 books is quite difficult for somebody who reads as much as Michelle and I do. So these are also subject to change, but we just wanted to go over some of the ones that just really stood with us, ones that we've read either recently or a long time ago. I know I've got both in the mix on this list. But the first book that I wanted to talk to you guys about was Carol Dweck's book, Mindset. This book has been around for quite some time. I'm sure some of you have read it. It's one that I return to quite frequently, and it's one that I try to help guide me in my relationships with people. Essentially, the central theme of this book is there are 2 contrasting mindsets. 1, the fixed mindset, and 2 is the growth mindset. And really the big differential or differentiating factor between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset is, with a fixed mindset, people think that their qualities, their intelligence, their talents, what have you, are fixed traits that cannot be changed. Meaning, if you have a fixed mindset, you tend to really fear failure. You view effort as fruitless because you kind of feel like whatever hand you've gotten in life, whatever's been dealt to you, is what you're stuck with. Versus the other hand, individuals with a growth mindset really believe that abilities and talents and what have you can be developed over time, regardless of setbacks. They really do believe that effort is the end all be all, because you can learn and you can grow. And to me, this is something that's a really guiding principle in my life, because not only have I identified through years of being intentional about this that I have a growth mindset, but I genuinely try to surround myself with other people who have a growth mindset as well. And I want to debunk for a lot of people. Sometimes people say, oh, you're saying like they have to have a growth mindset. That means that they have to be super accomplished and successful. And that's definitely not the case. It's a mindset. You can be starting at, ground zero, have nothing accomplished that you're trying to get accomplished, but your mindset believes that you can get you there. And, many of the people in my life that I'm really good friends with, I'm friends with people who in all walks of life, in all different spaces in their journey. And I think that this is something that really resonates with me in terms of how you attack things. Anything. It kind of leads me into another book by Marie Forleo. She says everything is figure outable. That's her big book. And I genuinely believe that everything is figure outable with concerted and persistent effort. What I really love about this book is she gives tactical, practical strategies for cultivating a growth mindset and making sure that you're feeding into that. Encouraging that love of learning, embracing challenges, and facing a culture of continuous improvement and not being scared of it, which is something that I really keep as a tenet in my life and in my relationships. So some things that we can do to help cultivate people who have a growth mindset is make sure that we're praising effort and strategizing around the process of learning rather than being so results oriented. And I think that a lot of people kind of tend to look at it that way. We're like living in the results economy, which is, valid when you're running a business, and you definitely need to pay attention to those things. But you're not going to start out being amazing at everything that you attempt. And something that took me a long time to learn is that something does not have to be inherently true about you. You can change things about you, right? So I'll give you one example in my life. I always said I'm terrible at math. Like when I was in college, I took math for liberal arts as one of my electives because I just wanted to I needed a math credit and I wanted to avoid taking any sort of mathematical class because I thought that I sucked at it, right? Uh-huh. Fast forward 10 years later, and I'm literally a tax attorney who calculates tax credits. So it just goes to show, we've touched on this before, the 10,000 hour rule applies to everything. If you put effort into something and you make a concerted effort to make it a priority, you can change something that is fundamentally true about yourself. So I love this book. I go back to it frequently. Sometimes I catch myself doing things that would be considered a fixed mindset. And then I have to remind myself, Jenny, you do not have a fixed mindset. You have a growth mindset. So I just think like having tools in the language surrounding stuff like that is really, really helpful for somebody who is on a personal development journey.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Mm-hmm.
You want to take us into the next book? This next book, you guys, is a book that is near and dear to both Michelle and I. Yeah. And we're not going to give you guys, a detailed report of every single thing in these books because we genuinely think that they're worth the read. Mm-hmm. But we will give you like tenets of how they spoke to us. And in some cases, we're going to read some excerpts to you guys as well.
Yes. So our next book is Untamed. Let me tell you guys, this book just awakened my soul. And after reading it, I felt like the most empowered woman. I thought I could do anything. And not just saying that, I really felt that way. So if you have not read this book yet, put it on your list for summer. It is a must read. And it is a memoir of Glennon Doyle's life. And it's basically a guide on learning to be brave during different periods of your life. And she focuses on like being brave in the workforce, whether you're in a corporate company, leaving corporate world to start your own business, being brave in love, parenthood. She talks about being brave during her divorce. It's just a really good book on touching on all those topics. And she really talks about, learning to make peace with yourself on not following what society wants for you. I think in so many ways, we always think, this is what we should be doing with our lives. This is what society tells us. This is what our parents say that we should do. It's really about, finding your inner peace of wanting to do what you want to do and what makes you happy and following that. So I'm going to read an excerpt from here that really stuck with me, I think. And what I like to do kind of is just like highlights like all the parts of the book that really speak to me. And, every like so often, like I'll go back and just reread those, just reminds myself.
I do the same thing. My books are so messy. Like they just have sticky notes in them everywhere. That's hilarious.
Mine too. Sometimes I'll even like make little notes on the side.
Read this, Ginny, again, period.
Exactly. Okay, so just wanted to start out by saying, so mental illness, addiction, shame, narcissism, fear passed down by religious and cultural institutions. These are boulders that interrupt love's flow. And your parent, your sister, your friend, the one who couldn't love you, her love was impeded. That love was there, swirling, festering, vicious in its desperation for release. It was there. It is there, all for you. That love exists. It just couldn't get past the boulder. And I found this was really important and speaking to me because I feel like a lot of times in our relationships, if you're not, return love the same way that you were giving it, you tend to think, what was it? Was it me? Did I do something wrong? And a lot of the times, people from your past, either, your parents, past relationships, it was things within their life, either, if they were suffering from mental illness, if they, had issues that withheld them from giving love that they couldn't, but they wanted to, or the love was there. They weren't showing it the way that you wanted it to be showed. And, a lot of times people think it's a reflection on themselves. And I think that was hard for me in the past too. I would think, is it me? Am I, unworthy of love? And I really had to like teach myself it's maybe something that they are struggling with. And that kind of leads me into the next excerpt that goes with it. Just made huge here, so I'll just read it here. A woman becomes a responsible parent when she stops being an obedient daughter, when she finally realizes that she's creating something different from her parents. And even if, so I'm not a parent yet, I don't have a family, but I just believe, once you start following other people and being obedient of what other people want from you and just going out on your own, I think you learn to create something different from, what your parents were teaching you or what society was telling you.
It's so funny that you pulled that quote because I also love that quote so much because so many times we put ourselves in this frame of mind where almost like a childlike state, right? Because it's like hard to break free, especially when you're in those relationships with people and you find yourself in the same room with them. You're much older and you just don't realize that you're a different person. You have to pull not only from your experience, but theirs, and you have to be cognizant of those things. For those of you guys who don't know Glennon Doyle, she also has a podcast. It's fantastic. This book is a great read, but that podcast is great too. She tackles really important topics. So highly recommend you guys go check that out. And I'm going to also read an excerpt that really spoke to me in this book, but I want to give you guys a little bit of context. I'm a huge proponent of seasonality, right? I think that everything in life is a season. And I think that it's okay to put yourself in a position where you don't always have to be ecstatic all the time, right? Not everything is going to be new and fresh all the time. That's how marriages work. That's how long-term relationships work. And something that I used to personally struggle with whenever I was young was kind of like the newness and the excitement of everything, right? And when you're in a long-term relationship, that's not always going to be there, but that's okay. You just have to grow and evolve with it. Mm-hmm. And she touches on this a little bit in her book. Her and her wife, Abby, have been married for, quite some time at this juncture, but she wrote her a poem when they were kind of still in those initial honeymoon phases. of the relationship where everything is new and exciting. And once that starts to dwindle, you know, a little bit of the allure can seemingly wear off, but that's not true. Your relationship is just kind of growing and evolving. So she wrote her a poem. And in that poem, she was talking a little bit about how just magnetic their love was, right? And how it was vivid and they could see it in color. And then she kind of came down from that a couple of years later and wrote this excerpt, which really speaks to me just from a relational standpoint. She says, Abby and I have been normal people for a couple of years now. We are in the next part now. The initial buzz has worn off, but sometimes we're sky blue again. It's not a permanent state anymore. It comes in fleeting moments. It happens when we make love, steal a kiss in the kitchen, catch each other's eyes, when the kids do something amazing. Mostly, though, we're separate colors. This is a beautiful thing because we really can see one another. I have decided that I want to be in love with a person, not a feeling. I want to be found in love, not lost in it. So this is something that just really speaks to me about the evolution of a long-standing relationship. And it really hit home with me because that's the kind of love that I experience with my husband. We've been together for quite some time now. So it's just great to see somebody put those words so astutely in a way that resonates with me. And it's important for us to understand, especially younger women who are in the dating pool. You can't expect to have that like excitement that comes in those initial phases on a sustainable period. It's really similar to what I've talked about in the past with the difference between happiness and joy. Happiness is fleeting, but joy can be sparked in the moment. And I think that's a really good parallelism for relationships that are long-term. So I just really love this book. I return to it often. I know Michelle loves it too. Yeah. Very happy with your pick on that one.
Yes. Okay, Jenny, you want to give us your number 2? Not in order, but second most influential read that you picked.
It's really funny that she said not in order, because the fact that when I tell you guys, this is probably one of my favorite books of all time. I mean it. It lives in perpetuity on my bedside table. So this book, which you can see is very marked up and it's very highlighted. It's a book. It's a collection of essays by Brianna Wiest. It's entitled 101 Essays That Will Change the Way You Think. And really, for me, this book is just about evolving and evolution in every aspect of your life. Not only for the self-work that you're doing, the personal development that you're doing, whether it's your job, your career, of course, your relationships. If you are going through struggle with relationships, this book is for you. But it has a table of contents in it. So you can kind of like flip through it and go to where whatever it is that you're needing in that moment. Mm-hmm. I have read this book so many times. I can't even tell you. You know, it's just something that I return to often. And I think that she is so wise and provides so much wisdom on topics that I don't think a lot of people talk about. I'm going to read you guys a couple excerpts, because really that's the best way in my mind to showcase this book. Not all of them are going to resonate with you guys, but there is something for everyone in this book. I've given it to many a friend who are going through a hard breakup or a season of disillusionment where they just don't know what to do next in their career or their lives, and they're just kind of lost. Great book for kind of grounding yourself and doing the work that's intentional to know where you want to go. So I'm going to read you guys 3 excerpts. I know that's a lot, but I just think that they're very pertinent and I highly recommend. So this one is in the chapter entitled Signs: The Only Problem with Your Life is the Way You Think About It. And the quote is, when you've lost sight of the magic of the little things, it's not because the magic has gone elsewhere, only that you've chosen to disregard it in favor of something else. So again, I constantly talk about how you need to spark joy on your own in the moments, and it's there for you. You just have to take advantage of it. The next excerpt is from a chapter entitled Things You Need to Know About Yourself Before You Have the Life That You Want. Kind of like leaning into manifesting and making sure that you are prepared to receive the things that you say that you want. So this excerpt is one that it's kind of my mantra, to be honest, at this point. And she says, What do you want them to say at your funeral? That you wore a small pant size and had a successful job that prevented you from actually developing relationships, or that you were loving and kind and cared about your work, but cared about people more? Your impermanence is a thing you should meditate on every day. So another thing, kind of another tirade and thinking about, wow, we're only here for a moment. So you need to make sure that you're maximizing that, and you need to make sure your priorities are correct. I know I spent so much time in my 20s throwing away time just thinking about, oh, am I thin enough? Oh, do I look the way that society says that I should look? And, that quote I'm grounded in often. And also another thing that I kind of reflect on frequently is like, the way you look is the least interesting thing about you.
Yeah.
And, as somebody who really, really prides myself on trying to continually evolve, I think that's something that I have to return to frequently. I am not perfect, right? I have to remind myself of some of these, logical things that we all should know, but that we somehow seem to forget given the pressures of society. And then the last thing that I want to kind of leave you with regard to this book, it's in the chapter entitled 10 Questions to Ask Yourself When You Don't Know Where Your Life Should Go Next. And Brianna says, if you had to live tomorrow on repeat for the rest of your life, what would you do? Or put another way, if you live today on repeat forever, where would you be? What would you have accomplished? Would you be thriving at work? Would you have made time for the people you love? Would you have written a book or played music or be spending your money in a healthy way? Would you be dressing like yourself and enjoying the sunrise and eating in a way that will sustain you over the long term? Your life exists in days, not in your ideas about those days. Your habits accumulate and begin to default. Imagining that you'll never grow out of them is the fastest way to a reality check. So kind of going into, we've talked about habit stacking on this podcast before. We've talked about reading a million books and not implementing what you're learning from them. And I think that it is, sometimes you do have to give yourself a little bit of a reality check to say, hey, am I actually walking the walk? Because in a lot of cases, I have found when I do that reality check that I'm not. So I keep this book on my bedside to make sure that I am giving myself those very well needed reality checks.
Great. Love it. That one is going on my list as well. I've been meaning to read it. And when you pulled it up, I was like, oh, and I actually put it in my cart to buy. So I'm excited.
I love it.
Read it.
I love it. Every woman should read that book. Like if you take away nothing from this podcast, read that book.
Great. Okay. So my next book that I want to share with you guys that has been one of my most influential reads, I think, as an entrepreneur, is Think and Grow Rich, which is a very popular one, in the leadership world, business world. And I think, a lot of companies actually make their employees read it. And I think almost every leader or entrepreneur that I've met as far has read this book. It just, talks about how to lead a successful life and helps to identify your goals, master the secret of success, and help you go after whatever you want in life. And I know that I actually return to this book every year, just kind of reread it, just familiarize myself again with those tips and tricks, help to keep myself on track throughout my journey. And it highlights 13 principles that have been mastered by successful and wealthy individuals. And Napoleon Hill, who's the author, he interviewed nearly 500 of the most affluent men and women in our society. Those are including like Dale Carnegie, John Rockefeller, Thomas Edison, Mary Kay, Charles Schwab, and the list goes on. And he kind of picked their brains about what led them to success and wrote them down for everyone to read. And what I'll do is I'll go through the top 3 principles that I felt are the most important or have been the most important to me, and then a couple of excerpts from those principles. So we'll first start out with failure, which wasn't one of the principles, but kind of leading into the principles. And he says, one of the most common causes of failure is the habit of quitting when one is overtaken by temporary defeat. Every person is guilty of this mistake at one time or another. Before success comes to most people, they are sure to meet with much temporary defeat and perhaps some failure. When faced with defeat, the easiest and most logical thing to do is to quit. And that is exactly what a majority of people do. And their greatest success came just one step beyond the point at which defeat had overtaken them. Failure is a trickster with a keen sense of irony and cunning. It takes great delight in tripping one up when success is almost within reach. And I just love that because I feel like every, person's journey, I'm sure they face some type of failure. And, me, myself, I've, hit those kind of like road bumps and thinking about quitting, but, really deep down, I held to it, overcame it. And exactly what it says, I feel like every time I did fail, once I learned from my mistakes, started over, I was just that much closer to success.
Yeah. That's a principle we firmly believe in on this podcast, you guys. Failing forward.
Failing forward, yes. And then the first principle I'll talk with you guys about is about desire. And that's the first step to achieving riches, as Napoleon Hill says. So every human being who understands the purpose of money wishes for it. Wishing will not bring riches, but desiring riches with the state of mind that becomes an obsession, then planning definite ways and means to acquire riches, and backing those plans with persistence, which does not recognize failure, will bring riches. And I truly believe that, in order to be successful, you have to desire it and want it. And, a lot of people could just say, I want to have money, but you really have to have a desire for what you're doing and to become successful.
Yeah.
The next principle I'll go over is persistence, which is one of my favorite principles. And, what persistence is, many people will give up, also with the failure. But those that are persistent will continue through and become successful. And the last principle is actually funny. So is decision. And one of my 2023 resolutions was to be more, better at making decisions. And my boyfriend actually holds me to it all the time. Whenever we're making a decision about anything, where we're going to eat, what we want to do, he's like, all right, Michelle, it's 2023. You're making a decision.
I cannot wait to see this in action when I'm visiting you guys. This is great.
So funny. But I think, a lack of decision making was actually near the top of the 30 major causes of failure. And, if you're not great at making a decision, actually, I believe that it hinders you. It kind of doesn't allow you to move forward because you'll be stuck of, what should I do? I feel like that takes up so much time if you're not decisive and know what you want out of life.
Agreed.
So I have learned to become more decisive, and especially in my decision making in 2023. I think it's going well so far, but we have to ask Chris.
We're all gonna champion Michelle for her decision making and decisiveness, you guys.
Yes.
Cheers to Michelle.
Yeah. All right, Jay, what is your number 3 pick?
I already gave a spoiler alert, you guys. In fact, I've talked about this book quite often, but alas, here we are. Failing Forward by John Maxwell. One of my favorite books of all time. It's just really about reframing your brain and kind of dispelling the negative connotations that are often associated with failure. Piggybacks really nicely off of your last pick, Michelle. He essentially argues that failure is not something that should be feared or avoided, but rather it's a valuable teacher, right? There are so many lessons and insights that you can glean from failing at something. In fact, I would argue that you learn more from failure than you learn from success. So you have to be able to shift your mindset and embrace failure as kind of like a stepping stone towards the success that you want to achieve. And if once you've reframed that in your brain, then you can start to harness the power of failure into something that is productive, right? Versus something that is catastrophic. So Maxwell really emphasizes the importance of developing a positive and resilient mindset towards failure. You have to reframe failure as an opportunity as opposed to a setback. It's not a setback, it's a setup. You can't dwell on failure, because dwelling on failure is literally the least productive thing that you can do. You should look at it and say, well, dang, that really sucked. What am I going to learn and execute moving forward so that I don't make that same mistake again? I've talked many times about, some of the failures that I've had, big and small. The biggest one was failing the bar exam. From a career perspective, that's one of my biggest failures. And I had to learn what caused me to fail that exam so that I could then learn to pass it, right? So one quote that I want to share with you guys, and this is like just kind of goes into the habit stacking and putting ourselves in a position where we can actually do things that are productive to move us forward. So as Harvard psychologist Jerome Bruner says, you're more likely to act yourself into feeling than to feel yourself into action. So you got to fake it till you make it sometimes, you guys. Like, genuinely, like, especially if you're failing on a big stage, sometimes you're not going to feel like going back out there and being positive. And I'm not talking about toxic positivity. I'm talking about you have to trick yourself into thinking that you're taking productive steps towards something, and every single thing that you're doing on that journey is going to be productive and put you in a position to succeed. And it doesn't always feel that way. And sometimes you just don't want to do it. But taking those steps and persistently and consistently making sure that you're prioritizing that will pay off in the long run. It's not going to happen in the time that you want it to always, but it will pay off in the long run. And I think those two books in tandem, I've also read Think and Grow Rich, and I think it's an amazing book. They really go hand in hand with one another. That being said, make sure you throw both of them are a little dry. They're on the drier side, but they're very content rich. So make sure that you're reading them at your own pace and, having a really interesting podcast that you're listening to on the side.
Okay. Last book that we're going to bring to you today, which is my number 3 of most influential books, and it is Working with Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. And this has been one of the books that actually helped change my mindset to go from a negative to positive mindset. I read it when I was just starting out in my career, about like 5 years ago. And this is a book that I'll continuously go back to, reread. And, emotional intelligence, it's the capacity for recognizing our own feelings and also those of others. It helps us motivate ourselves and also manage emotions in ourselves and also within our relationships. I think it's really important also if you're client facing to have emotional intelligence and be aware. Be aware of others' feelings, know how to listen and have empathy. And being smart or having a high IQ really it doesn't matter that much. It's really about emotional intelligence and how you handle your emotions and also how you value others' emotions.
Absolutely.
And I know also, a lot of companies are also implementing these books for their employees to read. And I really believe if you want to become a leader or take on a leader role, this is a really important book to read. And, 5 of the emotional intelligence skill sets that they go over are self-awareness, self-management, motivation, empathy, and also social skills. And just 5 kind of like quick takeaways that I had and really helped me work on myself. It's, the first was just to be able to express my feelings and emotions. I grew up in a household where we didn't really share our emotions or talk about how we felt or what was bothering us. So I really had to learn, how to voice what was bothering me, stick up for what I wanted, and explain, how I was feeling, whether that was in, personal relationships, business relationships. Always held everything in. And then it got to a point where, I couldn't hold it in any longer. And that normally didn't turn out great.
What? There were unforeseen consequences for emotional suppression?
Exactly.
Can relate because I'm the same. So
yeah. And to tie it back to our podcast that we had a few weeks ago when we spoke with Erin, just teaches you how to be vulnerable. The second key takeaway I had was just to remain calm in stressful situations. I feel like I used to be a person that would get, just very, just not be able to remain calm when stressful things were happening around me, and really didn't allow me to to my greatest potential. Third key takeaway that I had was active listening to others, and then also having empathy towards others. And I think this is, so important, especially like I was saying, within those client relationships. Really important to be able to listen to others, what others are feeling, take that into consideration, especially when they're offering you feedback.
Yeah.
Fourth key takeaway was to learn from your mistakes and be open to criticism. I, in the past, kind of felt that I took it personally when someone would critique me, and felt it as like an attack on myself. And I really had to teach myself, like, no, this is helping you grow. You have to be open to other people trying to help you and wanting you to grow. And then the fifth key takeaway, Jenny talked a lot about a growth mindset. So the fifth is to have that growth mindset and to stop having that victim mentality. A lot of times you want to think, why me? Why is this happening to me? Rather than reflecting, seeing why this is happening, kind of getting ahead of it.
Also, Michelle recommended this book to me before the podcast, and I have not read it yet, and it is on the way to my house. So I am very excited to read it. We're going to put together a post for you guys on social that kind of outlines all of the books that we've gone over today. Obviously, we're both very fond of all of these books, so highly recommend reading them. Put them in your to be read pile. So that will be forthcoming. And also next week on the podcast, Michelle is going to be taking us through some budgeting techniques, because she is not only the quote queen, but also the queen of travel and an amazing financial advisor. So she's going to give us some tips and tricks to take the most optimized vacation that we possibly can, and also live within our lifestyles from a budgeting standpoint, and making sure that we're making conscious decisions. So super, super excited to have her share with us next week. We hope you guys all tune in, and we will give you guys a heads up on the wine prior to the show so that you guys can imbibe with us.
Yes. We hope you all have a fantastic rest of your week, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Awesome. Go kill it, guys.